Hi, it's Alexis.
And Christian from Tiny House Expedition. And we built our tiny house way back in 2014.
With the help of friends and family, over 9 months of ups and downs and trial and error, it was all worth it in the end.
We built a cozy custom home of our own that led us to an adventure of a lifetime. And now we're working on a shuttle bus conversion.
In our DIY Tiny Home Build Stories series, we hope to inspire and empower you to take on your own build by yourself or with help.
I needed help. I definitely needed help. And after you watch this, visit tinyhousebuild.com for how-tos and building tips. All right, guys, you got this. Let's do it.
Hi, I'm Joel.
I'm Sara.
And this is our tiny house. It's in the Cully neighborhood of Portland, Oregon. I mean, it was a long process, and I think it was trying at times for both of us in different ways and trying for us together. Fortunately, our build went pretty smoothly. I think we didn't have any moments where we were like, what are we doing? This is too small. We can't live in here. Or, you know, it kind of came together, and we continued being excited about it as we went. But just a huge learning curve for both of us. We've both used tools before, done DIY projects of different kinds, but nothing on this scale, and nothing where we felt quite as much like we had to get it right the first time, which is hard for, never done that before, but installing windows, like we can't let these leak, so we better learn how to do it right, get it right. So I think for both of us that meant like a lot of like really sweating the details, probably overdoing things, and that's kind of ground the pace down to pretty slow.
Yeah, and we did build the whole house ourselves. We got some help from friends, but most of them are not professionals. Most of them don't have much experience, and we had one friend who is a carpenter, and he helped us with the cabinetry, the cabinet drawers, but otherwise we had talked about, hiring out some of the pieces, but it all feels so overwhelming in the beginning to like map out all of the different stages. But as you go and you start, just ticking away at little bits of it, it feels like, well, the next step is approachable, so let's do that. And then you'd finish that and you're like, well, the next step seems doable too, let's do that. And ended up doing the whole thing ourselves. And I'm really happy we did, because I think we learned like what parts we like about the process and what we'd be happy to hire out if we ever do build a house. And
a painter, a plumber.
Yeah.
Never doing that again.
Yeah. Yeah, painting, it turns out, is a lot of work.
And a lot of skill.
Yeah.
We probably researched the project for about 6 months and drew plans and looked at other houses and kind of hemmed and hawed, decided if we were really serious about it, decided what our budget would be. That was about 6 months, and then we bought our trailer, and for about 18 months, started in summer of 2018 and finished up at the end of 2019. So we moved into it about a year and a half ago. And it was not done. It was livable, but still had a lot of work to do when we moved in. Probably another 6 months of finishing that up before we really felt like the house was done or nearly done. And at this point, it's kind of just maintenance. So it's about 2 years of building. That was mostly us working weekends, 3-day weekends for a lot of that. I was working 3 days a week and then 4 days a week for part of that time. So we had some time. Mostly it was nice for us to have the weekends because we'd have all week to figure out what we were doing and round up supplies and answer questions. And we kind of needed that time just to figure out how to make the best use of the actual work time we had. We rented space on a farm just outside Gresham, so 20 miles from here. It was under a big old pole barn, so we had a dry space to build and make messes, and we were able to keep working all winter, even though it was cold and dark. The first winter we were out there, before we had lights and stuff on in here. Yeah, those were dark times. But yeah, it was really nice to have a large space to work and not worry about making noise and messes and dust.
Yeah, it's like building a house with your partner is a really big relationship challenge for sure. I think it's definitely our biggest challenge in our relationship, but I think overall it was really positive, and in the end, like, we learned so much about each other and how to work together, which is important for us. Like, there's plenty of couples who just decide not to do projects together and to not work together, and they're happy to just have their separate spaces. But I think for us, that's really important that we're able to do big projects together. And in like thinking about future projects, like building a home or having a kid, like knowing how to communicate and how to work through challenges has been, I think overall it's been like, a hugely positive thing for our relationship. And we're both definitely perfectionists in different ways. And I think that was maybe our biggest challenge, is I would be a perfectionist about something that Joel thought was unimportant and vice versa. And I think that's a challenge we just kind of continually had to work through, especially when we didn't know how to build a house, and so we didn't know what we needed to be really particular about and what didn't matter in the end. And I think now we have a lot more appreciation for where it's important to be really a perfectionist about the details and where it doesn't really matter. And so I think even like when we built the deck, we were able to let go of some things that didn't matter quite as much.
Well, probably the same advice that everyone told us is that it's going to take twice as long as you think it is. Be our advice. And we didn't believe them. We were like, nah, look, we got this plan. It's going to go super smooth. But, not quite. Pretty much twice as long as we were hoping to get it done in about a year. We really invested in our plans up front. And we made a SketchUp model. I don't recommend that to everyone. It's kind of, SketchUp itself has a learning curve. It's not for everybody, but I use SketchUp a lot for work, so I was familiar with it. We just put everything into that, and it really helped. We didn't find places we meant to have plumbing that we couldn't fit it in anymore. I think we avoided a lot of problems down the line, kind of puzzle piecing everything together just by kind of mapping it out first in SketchUp. It's a complicated house. We try to use every little square inch of space for one thing or another, and really kind of a Tetris game to get everything to fit.
Recommend to people that if you aren't planning to move it a lot, that you build the house that's the size that is practical for you. Ours is 26 feet long, and I'm glad it's not any bigger, because I think then you run into more problems with finding a place to park it. It seems like there's kind of a limit in often parking spots ask for no bigger than 24 feet, and 26 feet can usually kind of squeeze in there. But so I'm glad we didn't go any bigger, but we also went a little bit wider than 8'6", and it's just a $50 permit to move it, and you don't need an extra vehicle or anything unless you go over 10 feet. And so that felt like it makes the space feel so much bigger, and even just adding a few inches makes such a big difference in the width. And I think every time I've talked to someone who's starting to build their tiny house, I'm like, just consider going a little bit wider. There's not much repercussion to it, and it really makes a difference in the livability, I think.
We were fortunate to tour a tiny house before we started building that was a bit like ours. It was about 6 inches wider than normal, and we walked in and we're like, this is nice. And then kind of looked around, we're like, is this just a little bit bigger? And the owner was like, yeah, it's about 9 feet. Just a few inches. It's crazy how noticeable it is. One thing about tiny living, and I guess it probably applies to home ownership in general, is you're never done. I think our to-do list it kind of stopped shrinking maybe about a year ago. And then we called the house done, but there's still, a handful of things to do before the fall. This and that, we're gonna restain it at some point. We gotta put some firewood up. Kind of never ends. And it seems like a tiny house, you use it pretty intensely. Every square foot gets used more than in a regular house. So it cleans up pretty fast, but kind of a constant work, constant maintenance going on, which is fine. I think nothing feels very overwhelming, but it's kind of a constant cycle.
Yeah, which doesn't feel so different than home ownership. But I think you're right that we do use it more intensely. And it's also just not something you think about when you're building a tiny house. You think oh, this is great. When we started building, I was happy to not be buying a house, because I just saw so many of my friends buy houses and then spend every weekend working on their house. And it's I'm not ready for that yet. I want to go on adventures on the weekends. But we still spend a day every weekend doing something on the house or on the property, working on the gardens.
Gardening.
And which is, it's just a good reminder that living in, if you're responsible for the space you're living in, then it's going to be work. Mostly it's it's more enjoyable when it's your space and you own it, but it's definitely work.
Hey, it's Alexis again.
And Christian from Tiny House Expedition. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
And to watch the full tour of the DIY tiny home you just learned about, click over here. And don't forget to visit tinyhousebuild.com for building how-tos and advice.